Deep in the heart of the remote shifting sands of the Gobi Desert lurks one of the most bizarre and elusive creatures ever reported to be seen by man. Known to the Mongolian Nomads as Olgoi Korokoi, and known in the West as the Mongolian Death Worm. Many have claimed to have encountered the beast, and feel lucky to have escaped with their lives. Efforts to capture the creature have proven difficult, and thus the legend remains fueled by the numerous eyewitness accounts and reported deaths caused by the creature. But could an ancient monster truly be living beneath the sands of the Gobi? Or could some unknown species be the answer? Join us tonight on Into the Portal as we search for a monster, the Mongolian Death Worm.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal, your gateway to the bizarre. I'm your host, Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay. Yeah, welcome back.
Yep.
It's thanks to some backlogged research that we were able to crush out another episode here for you guys.
That last one was a bit intense, but you know, it was fun. I really
it was
enjoyed
super fun, and I hope other people had fun with it too. Lots of detail again. And
we kind of realized it was definitely more of a history lesson, but
a little bit.
Just like a touch of a legend and myth and all that fun stuff.
I mean, it was obviously the legend that drew us in, and then as we started to do it, we realized that there's so much detail as usual with all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like there's rabbit holes to go down everywhere you turn.
Oh
basically.
Yeah. So this one's gonna be a little bit lighter. We're gonna have fun with it. So why don't we introduce ourselves or the topic?
Yeah. So I mean, we're dealing with a real monster here. Mm-hmm. This is beyond like the Ogopogo and stuff like that in terms of being like freaky. So we're dealing with the Mongolian Death Worm.
Yes, Death Worm.
Yeah,
death in the title.
Slightly ominous.
So
you might say.
Yeah, I don't think besides that whole bit we did at the intro of Ogopogo, I don't think we actually came across any instances of fatalities.
No.
So this is going to be a little bit more intense.
A little different.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, it's a true cryptid creature, really. There's been so many different expeditions to find it, and it's typical, like, right, the indigenous populations report seeing it, experiencing it, having relatives killed by it.
And the reports go back hundreds, if not thousands of years.
That's correct? The thing. Like, they go back... I mean, yeah, this has been... The legend has been passed down through the generations, through, southern Gobi nomadic peoples. The thing is like, there's not much in English. That's like one of the things, like all these researchers that we're going to get into in a second, we're going to give the whole timeline for trying to find this thing. But because this is Mongolia, the majority of any work done was either in Mongolian, obviously, because that's where it's located. And then when it was translated, it would be translated into Russian. So
because of the Cyrillic language,
exactly,
right? The alphabet
because
or
they
whatever.
have similar language, and obviously it was also in the Soviet
So a lot
Union.
of language barrier issues, but what we've managed to kind of scrounge up is definitely quite fascinating.
Yeah, definitely.
So basically, let's start off with the Gobi, I guess. I have some stats here, just basic. So it's it encompasses an area in Mongolia, bordering China. It is rapidly expanding as the years progress, just because of desertification, things like that.
Yeah.
It's eating up like thousands of acres of grassland in China every year.
Crazy.
Which is not very good for them.
Not ideal.
So basically, it's like kind of like an arc, and it's about approximately, this is kilometers, 1,200,095 kilometers squared.
Crazy.
So again, that would be close to roughly 500,000 square miles.
It's a pretty massive territory.
And this was as of 2007. So just imagine that this is expanding. So now we're in 2018. This is more than a decade later. So it's going to be even bigger than that. It is the 5th largest desert in the world. And it's Asia's 2nd largest. Right. So there's some basic, so that is a lot of area to explore. Kind of feeds into the idea that if you're making a short expedition specifically looking for this worm, you're probably not going to find it, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, definitely.
More so in the expeditions part. Another interesting thing I thought was that much of the Gobi is not actually sandy, but it's bare exposed rock.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. It kind of has I actually, I came across 5 distinct climates within the Gobi.
Right.
So there's
Lots of
desert
different-
steppe, there's it's not mountain, like there are mountains, there's not forest, but
Right.
anyways, in the semi-desert areas, whatever, scrublands, that type of thing.
Totally. And the area that we're dealing with for the most part for the death worm is in the South Gobi, but this is still a massive swath of territory.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be kind of more like that type of landscape that you just said, sort of more of a semi-arid, some kind of like shrubbery and things like that.
Yeah.
But,
in the blog, we're going to include a map.
Definitely.
And just like zero in on the actual area that we're talking about.
Definitely. And obviously...
and for the YouTube channel.
Up on the
obviously.
YouTube channel too. Yeah, we'll have all the... all the images of this thing, and there's some crazy ones out there, and there's obviously some video clips and stuff like that as well. So we'll make sure we provide all that stuff on the YouTube channel, and yeah, go check it out. The link's on the website and on my Instagram, and yeah, subscribe to us on YouTube. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean the Gobi, pretty gnarly place.
You came across some weird stuff.
Yeah, like, well, first off, I just want to say, like, obviously, I'm not familiar with the Gobi, and it was funny, we were like, oh, crap, here we are back, we're heading to the desert again, but obviously,
desert.
It's a very different type of desert. It's not, I mean, obviously, the Sahara will get very cold at nighttime, too, and things like that, but the different types of climates and stuff like that, it's definitely different. But some of the most rich dinosaur fossil finds have happened in the Gobi Desert, Roy Andrew Chapman is a fellow we were going to get into. He found dinosaur eggs and all kinds of stuff like that. Lots of species that are only indigenous to the Gobi. Lots of flora and fauna. So it's definitely like there's a lot going on there. One of the weirdest things that I've found when I was just looking into the Gobi, though, was horned skulls that have been found in the Gobi Desert. So I have a quote here. Archaeologists have discovered numerous strange artifacts in the Gobi. Several skulls, undoubtedly human, in quotes, or in brackets, were discovered on the Chinese-Mongolian border in 1995. What made them interesting is that all of them had horns. So either they were artificially embedded into the human skulls through some ancient ritual, or there was an ancestor of ours that obviously had horns.
That instantly to my mind brings up the Giant series done by Astonishing Legends not too long ago, right?
Yeah.
And that was my first question, was that, so is this the same example of skulls from the article used by Astonishing Legends, or is this an entirely different?
I think it might be a different one. I thought that the one they mentioned was in the US.
Yeah.
I thought. But
okay. We should definitely go back and re-listen.
We should.
Maybe.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of podcast episodes of different people we have to go back and re-listen to for some stuff. But anyway, but yeah, super weird, right? Like, that just
really
goes
cool.
to show...
So this was 1995,
95, yeah. And I feel like that's just a cool example of how, obviously, like, ancient civilizations in the Gobi, so just peoples being there, so like the descendants, the nomadic peoples there now, the descendants of these original peoples.
So in the article, it was several. Did they give an exact number? Or
no, not in the one I have. And the interesting part about it was they basically said that many months of studying the skulls were necessary in order to determine their origin, but the strange artifacts were scattered somewhere in museum storage. I don't know what museum is being referred to in this one article. Classic. I mean... Smithsonian,
a lot of this,
maybe?
well, right, like Smithsonian is definitely being guilty of that before.
And so it just says that the final conclusions were never published because they were lost. I don't know.
Though?
We didn't dig deep into that one.
It wasn't even that long
like
ago. 1995, that's 2 decades ago, approximately.
Yeah.
I guess that's a long time for something to be lost still.
Totally.
But anyway, that's really cool, though. So anyways, total side note, right?
Yeah, that was just to get some context on the Gobi.
That's cool. And the fact that there's definitely a lot of ancient paleo lakes, dinosaur finds that were, wow.
If there was
it's kind of part of the colonial narrative,
trying to basically
right?
set the stage at this cursory glance to suggest that, unlike maybe the Sahara, other places like that, like somewhere like the Gobi with its diversity and stuff, like would be a place where some cryptid creature could exist, I think. Mm-hmm. All these different climates, all this different history and flora and fauna. Paleo lakes, all that jazz. All the right recipe.
Indeed.
So, okay, let's give some more detail on this creature. So,
right.
like, it's actually, I want to give it's, like we said in the intro, it's not called the death worm. That's how it's known in the West. That's basically developed through popular culture and stuff like that.
It's more known as a intestine.
Yeah, so the Olgoi Korokoi, or Olgi
literally
koroki.
translates as intestine,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, intestine or intestine worm, I guess, possibly. But
Okay.
yeah, it does translate as intestine, and for obvious reasons that's what it looks like. So basically, these people say, people that have seen it say it varies in thickness and stuff like that, like as thick as a man's arm. Some say it's a little thicker than that. That it's blood red in color.
Yeah, because I came across some conflicting, like some people are saying it's like 2 feet, other people are saying it's
Yeah.
up to a meter.
Yeah.
Or a meter and a half even.
I've heard up to 7 feet. So a meter would be 3 feet, right? Something like that.
Approximately. Yeah, not exactly.
So, I mean, that's pretty big.
It is.
If you're thinking, like,
If
monstrous
you're thinking
worm.
things that would be hunting something the size of a child or even a full-grown man.
Yeah.
Because they do seem opportunistic. And I wonder, like, we didn't get any stats on whether or not it actually can see.
That's the thing.
If it's an underground dweller, then perhaps it relies on scent and heat and the vibrations.
Sensing vibrations.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Well, I mean, that would make sense. And what does that make you think of in terms of popular culture? Tremors with Kevin Bacon. And I don't know, there was rumors that like these like death worms were the inspiration for that, but I think it was actually some other stuff. And it is all sort of connected in inspiration wise, like lots of books that include the Mongolian Death Worm. But anyway, so a few more details on the creature. Basically, we've compiled the best descriptions and kind of paraphrased them into our own exactly here. But like, this creature lurks beneath the sands. It only comes up to attack prey. And according to some reports...
Oh, and only in, like, June and July, right? Like, it's hibernating.
Well, that's the one. Yeah, I did come across that, June, July.
Like, summer months.
But then I also came across a reference that suggested that it will surface when it preys, but then also in the rainy season, which I don't think is June, July.
Okay.
Because it's...
Oh, because...
Because then they can feed on other, like, flora, because there was one reference that it eats this certain type of flower, is a part of the legend. And also, it just would be less hot. So that kind of makes sense to me, maybe, if it would surface when it's wet.
I think my favorite aspect of this creature is its attack mode. And the ambiguity of this. Because we get accounts where it says it spits venom.
Right.
Of varying colors and distances. We get other accounts where basically it pops out of the ground and explodes. Like, its head explodes, and then that causes the venom to, like, burst out.
Spray out all over the...
Yes, lethal venom is described, basically incapacitating its prey right away. But the most fascinating part that I came across was the idea that it can carry an electric charge.
Right.
And if you touch it, it's instant death. And so we were kind of thinking, like, how would a creature like that obtain that sort of ability? That's like a super ability.
Yeah, I mean,
and so
obviously,
maybe we were talking, right? We were saying like, well, it's almost like when you drag your feet on the carpet, you get all that static electricity.
Right.
Maybe something similar, where it's just, it's in the sand all the time. It's traveling, burrowing, and tunneling all this stuff.
Well, if it can travel at the speeds that it would need to pull off the attacks that are described, then you would think
it's super
it would,
rapid.
Yeah, you'd think it would be able to generate some sort of electric charge. Yeah, some sort of static charge. I don't know.
That would be funny. Imagine if you're in the desert and it's almost like, the Bugs Bunny in the cartoons where it's like the big tunnel and you can see the dirt like up above the ground. Can you imagine?
That's
or
what's
is it sneakier?
That's what like some of those scenes from Tremors were like. And you know what? Everyone listening out there, Amber hasn't seen Tremors. And we were going to rent it like before we watched this, and I've seen it. And
Darn it.
It wasn't as critical for the episode, but that is how they travel in Tremors. Like, they're underground, but then sometimes like the Bugs Bunny pop up and it's their mound is coming at you. It's just a bunch of dirt. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. We need to get our hands on a copy of that. Eh?
We should just buy it. Add it in the collection, the old Kevin Bacon there. So yeah, beneath the sand. And what else do we have here for the description? I mean, it's basically...
It's relatively recent to Western knowledge, right? And we did kind of cover that because of the language barrier, because of the cultural differences and all that, and its seclusion in this desert.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, it's a fairly new, recent phenomena for us, but definitely not for these people living
so
there.
it wasn't really until... Because obviously, like, there was some Europeans in there in the 20s and stuff like that, but then it kind of, it was harder to get in there. So it wasn't, again, until the 90s that it really picked up again. It was sort of just found in literature in between. Okay. But, so looks like an intestine. Some have said it looks like a sausage, which is kind of a hilarious and not very intimidating description.
Blood sausage.
But blood sausage, I suppose. I mean...
A grub, an oversized grub.
An oversized grub, yeah. I mean, the other thing is that...
That's what the pictures look like to me. Reminds me of, like, Timon and Pumbaa. Remember that scene in the Lion King when they bust open the log and they're just, like, gulping down all these different delicious looking insects? And you're like, I wish I could eat those. And you're like 5, and then you grow up and you're like, that's so gross.
No,
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know what was real, like, the thing about this legend to me, though, because it is obviously, like, we're taking kind of a more lighthearted approach to it, but the thing about it that makes it feel real to me, and it's the same with a lot of these sort of cryptid creature stories, is just the sheer number of sightings, and then the way in which that the indigenous populations kind of, like, speak of it. So there's some people that say, like, oh, they kind of brush it off, like, I've never seen it myself, I've heard of it, but whatever, like, I don't really think about it. But then there's other people that are more remote that some of these researchers have talked to, we'll mention them in a sec, but that these people don't really like talking about it. And we came across that in the Ogopogo episode where, like, indigenous people sometimes, like, they don't want to talk about, like, skinwalker, or they don't want to talk about things that are, like,
more nefarious,
dangerous or more nefarious. And it's sort of the same thing with the death worm. I don't think it's, like, a mythical thing, like they believe it's real. But it doesn't hold
any place in, like, their own ethos or mythology where it's like a deity or some sort of thing to be revered in a sense. It's something to be feared.
Yeah.
Okay.
As that's a real thing.
That's a significant difference between this and the Ogopogo for me.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
They're both serpentine. They're both legendary, but very different natures. Yeah.
So, like, this one, I mean, man, these cities, these places in Mongolia are hard to pronounce. Dalanzadgad. My God, that's just brutal. Yeah,
Dalanzadgad.
And that's where this quote came from. Some of the local peoples there said that the death worm could be found nearby. And
these were the people that were climbing up.
Yeah, that it could be found nearby, but they wouldn't say much else. They didn't want to talk about it.
I came across some accounts of, like, locals that would basically give people, like, searchers and, like, researchers the I don't know if they're doing this intentionally or not, but it was almost like the roundabout where it's like, oh yeah, like, this is a hot spot for the worm, go find it there. And then they get to the neighboring village, and then the neighboring village would kind of push them further and further and further.
Right.
So it's almost as if it's like the pot of gold, or, like, you know, the leprechaun at the end of the rainbow, like that type of thing. Like, where it's like you're never gonna quite. But at the same time, like, if you were a local, wouldn't you want to do that to some of these people, some of these Westerners coming in with their fancy-dancy equipment and all their book learnings and all this stuff, and be like, you know what, I'll just send you on your way. You're not going to find it.
Yeah.
But anyways.
But you can pay me to tell you where it is. But yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you'd have to spend, if you believe this thing to be real, you would, any of these creatures, like, same with Sasquatch and Yeti and anything like that, you know, there's people that spend their entire lives out somewhere and they never see it. Like, for somebody to just go
just like us living in the Okanagan, we've never seen
the Ogopogo, but we've spent a lot of time on the lake.
I've seen a lot of anomalous waves.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway.
So, as far as, basic
let's get back,
info,
I've got some more detail.
We've kind of covered a lot of it, but...
I've got some more stuff here.
Oh, do ya?
Oh, I do.
Okay, well, there you go.
Okay. So, we've covered most of the sort of details on the worm itself. It varies in length, up to 7 feet long, quite thick as a man's arm, blood red in color, spits venom, potentially can conduct electricity and kill its victims that way.
Ooh, what about the head, though? The head of it has, like, these weird, gnarly spike-like teeth or something. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Looks like a big spike ball, almost.
Yeah, do you have that description pulled up, ready to go?
Well, I just have the quote from Carl Schucker.
Okay. So
he basically said that this is one of the world's most sensational creatures, and it may be concealed in the sands of the southern Gobi. So this is, quote, it is said to resemble a large fat worm up to 1 meter. So that's where we got the 1 meter from him. Yeah. With spike-like projections at both ends.
Okay, both ends.
Because I definitely did see some convoluted accounts where, exactly that, where it was like, you can't tell the head end from the tail end because they're basically the same. And then I got other accounts where it was basically saying... the head is distinct. Yeah, that's what I saw too. Yeah. I mean, just to corroborate a little bit from that, like the National Geographic article, I don't know if I can even call it that. It's like a brief kind of a fact sheet on the death worm because I think it was 2005. National Geographic, sorry? Is that
National Geographic, cool. Yeah. They did like a part in a series where they go looking for it, and that'll
Wasn't
be in
that
our
like the
links
2-minute video thing? That...
Yeah, it was very brief. They set up some camera traps and things like that. But they basically, in terms of the fact sheet, talk about it as resembling a giant earthworm. So that's the same as multiple sources we've had. So there's no legs. Definitely no legs that we've seen on this thing.
Definitely not like a centipede or something like that.
No, I mean, if you're going to mistake it for something, like a snake or a legless lizard or something like that, doesn't have legs.
Yeah.
But the National Geographic is the one that said has a very distinguishable head.
Okay.
And then I just made a little note underneath here saying, or tail. Which is it? Which it has a distinct end, but that doesn't mean you know if it's the tail or the head. I mean, there's pincers or claws for burrowing beneath the sand. So what the heck is this thing?
And there was some accounts that were even going so far as to say it had wings. And that like small
that
what would you even describe that as?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like the flaps coming out.
Oh
I almost
my
feel like that would be part of like a raptor attack. Like, things like, we were
talking about this earlier. Yeah,
yeah,
like from Jurassic. I can't remember what those things are called.
The scene with Newman, and then he gets spat in the face, and as he's trying to escape with the
right.
What is it? The egg? What does he have? Oh no, it's dinosaur DNA.
Yeah. He has like the tube of DNA or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, Newman. You knew it wasn't going to end well for him.
No, he was in there too.
But definitely that reminded me of that, because it's not as if there's accounts of it flying through the air.
No. So this is possibly like an evolutionary thing, is what you're suggesting.
Exactly. Part of its attack, part of its sort of way of intimidation, like that type of thing.
Possibly a way of adding to its propulsion through the sand. If it's not just wiggling through the sand, maybe sort of if it has something coming off the side.
You think that'd be like a hindrance, though, maybe.
I wonder.
I don't know.
Anyway. So yeah, super weird looking though, like lots of different descriptions, but too many similarities for it to be made up in terms of the descriptions.
Yeah.
And there's, like we said at the beginning, there's hundreds of sightings.
Yeah.
Now, Ancient Origins, not a peer-reviewed source, but it's a fun website. And I did find some stuff on there too, and they also said that it has a single spiky pointed end with the ability to just spray deadly. They refer to it as acid. I guess that's how it's described in a lot. Like it's a venom, but it burns, like it's corrosive. And I guess most venoms would be like on top of a skin, and even if it's not injected. Instant death.
Renders its prey.
Instant death. And I couldn't. It was sort of vague in some of these sources whether or not the instant death was from the venom itself or from the electric charge running through the liquid. Because presumably that's how it electrocutes, right? It shoots out this venom, which is a liquid, and then it has a charge that it can conduct through that shot.
Interesting.
So it can actually kill from a distance by electricity, supposedly.
That's so weird.
Which is
They would have to have some sort of thermal conductivity properties, right? Like the skin would have to...
Well, we know,
if this is... If you believe any of this.
But it's like, it's not even... obviously electric eels are a real thing. Yeah, they're submerged in water, but it's
True.
like that's a real thing. There's fish that can generate light.
This whole idea of spitting a substance out that is excessive and deadly and covers its victim is going to be part of my favorite theory that I'm going to save for like one of the last little bits. But anyways, yeah.
Okay.
We'll get back to that. As far as, so we've covered all the basic descriptors.
Yeah.
There's the idea that, this is from the Nomads, it's part of the legend that basically it lays its eggs in intestines of animals, like camels, its prey, that type of thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of opportunistic, and the baby death worms feed off of the body of the dead
thing.
They
hatch inside.
Exactly, and then basically that's where they get the red color, is the idea, perhaps.
Right. Mm-hmm. Born and raised in an intestine.
Like a lot of other things in this world.
Well, yeah, no, that does happen a lot. Obviously, it's a safe place. So, as a legend,
I'm trying to imagine, what if it's just like an oversized maggot, right? Because that's kind of what it looks like.
Well, it does sort of look like that, but of course, that wouldn't. Well, that's a lot less scary to think of it that way. Wouldn't be moving as quickly, I would imagine, if it was just that. You know what I mean? But anyway, I don't know which one of these ones sounds the most likely to me in terms of like the descriptions of how it looks. Like obviously it's the commonalities every time are that it's red, blood red, rough width, like the size of an arm or a human bicep basically. Other than that, like it can vary. Lynx vary, you know, but it raises its head out of the sand and
but
it
the lengths
kills
are
stuff.
easily explainable by age, right? Because like the specimen itself, so like it could be youthful, so
I never even thought of that.
not fully grown.
I never even thought of it like that, and that's really stupid because that makes total sense.
Biology, man.
It's like, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So there you
I
go.
think that even in and of itself sort of might corroborate eyewitness accounts. If people are seeing varying lengths, it doesn't necessarily mean it's because they're making it up.
And maybe if it's smaller, again, it's younger, and maybe it doesn't know as well as older, bigger ones to kind of keep to the underground.
Right.
So maybe that's why they're spotted. I don't know.
Could be.
That is definitely, yeah.
Look at this, though. I have this other note here, too. Like, it can kill in so many ways. Like, camels can die just from walking over a dead worm concealed beneath the sand. So if a worm had died and it was beneath the sand, it would be oozing this substance, I guess, and just, like, something can die just from walking over top of it. Right? Like, I guess you have to come in contact with it. So this is where it'd be like so some nomads would constantly in certain areas be poking holes in the sand with rods to just be safe.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's...
And of course you're using...
How would you ever feel safe?
So researchers in the future would go on to do the same practice, but with iron rods, attempting to conduct a charge from one of these worms. Interesting.
Huh. That's so weird.
That's super weird. Can you imagine looking for one of these things or walking around in the Gobi Desert? Like, of all the cryptid creatures too, like if you're looking for Loch Ness or if you're Loch Ness Monster, you're looking for Sasquatch or something like that, you know the experiences with both those creatures have not been fatal. You know what I mean? And then it's like you're looking for a cryptid creature where it's nothing but descriptions of this thing is going to spit corrosive acid in your face.
You know, that reminds me of the... Oh my gosh, there's that legend of the tomb of... Oh my god, whose tomb was it? And basically the story goes, like, you descend into Osiris's underworld, and this chamber is basically, it's guarded by a sphinx or something, a snake of some sort, and it automatically spits venom into your face as soon as you try to retrieve the gem or the treasure or whatever.
Right.
Anyways, that's a side note. Just got deserts and all that stuff in the
We're
brain.
like, are we just like subconsciously obsessed with deserts?
I
We
wouldn't.
must
I
be.
never considered myself.
I mean, we
to
sort
be.
of live in a desert in the Okanagan too. It's semi-arid. We got cacti.
We have a subtle preoccupation with desert and desertification. Oh my gosh.
Desertification.
Of the whole world. Anyways.
So basically, we're moving into expedition territory here.
The search for the death
So this
worm.
thing is insane. It's obviously caught the attention of so many people. You weren't able to go check it out because of the Soviet control of Mongolia, and also just North China was obviously off limits as well.
Yeah.
But before that sort of shutdown, we did have some expeditions, not specifically to look for the death worm, but in relation to it. So this was the Roy Chapman Andrews.
Okay.
So this was like, he existed in sort of the early 1900s, and he was the leader of the American Museum of Natural History Asiatic Expeditions Division.
Interesting.
So
this
spent-
guy's interesting. Hey, like, let's just say right now,
He's an interesting bird.
fascinating guy.
Yeah.
And honestly, yeah, like a lot of people credit him with being the inspiration for Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that reference. And you know what
Right?
was so funny about that too? You told me that just earlier, like yesterday or whatever. Potentially, like, yeah, the origin of that. And we had also just watched King Solomon's Mines, the movie,
And
where
that
that was
was-
supposedly an inspiration for Indiana Jones.
Exactly.
So this Indiana Jones connection here.
And we are going to be featuring a book called Dragon Hunter, and this is all about Roy Chapman Andrews and his Central Asiatic expeditions. It's by a guy named Charles Gallenkamp. Super fascinating. It's only $30 too, so it's a
Nice.
affordable read.
Yeah.
I have some cool info on this Andrews fellow. So apparently his first journey into East Asia was in 1909 when he was 25 years old. He spent... Okay, this is crazy. I'm just going to list these off here.
Go for it.
So he spent 2 weeks of his travels stranded on a deserted island. And this time he fended off sharks after his boat, which was capsized by a finback whale. He survived typhoons, heat stroke, poison bamboo stakes, headhunters, and 20-foot pythons. And apparently he shared Indy's loathing of snakes. Let's just say that. And he did have a rudimentary knowledge of medicine, and he ended up delivering 2 babies, he pulled several teeth, and he actually amputated a man's mangled hand.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
He did a lot, like, pretty insane.
People were a little hardier back in the day.
Yeah.
Hey? Like, I have a cold now, and I can barely drag my ass down to 7-Eleven to get any meds.
This New York Times article describes him as capable of talking his way into or out of any situation. So, yeah, pretty cool. We'll include this in our show notes, too, or resources page. It's a very fascinating article. But anyway, I just wanted to give a little backstory on this guy.
Yeah, and he was obviously...
And he even had the hat. He had the indie hat.
That's where the indie hat came from. Must have been.
Yeah. So anyways.
So yeah, he did a ton of work. Actually, like, even just from one, I don't know if it was his very first expedition, but it was one of his earliest expeditions in the Gobi, where there was over 50 scientific papers published between him and his crew just from that single expedition. So they're doing a ton of work. A ton of work. And it's dealing with dinosaur fossils, eggs, also just dealing with like looking at the flora and fauna in the area and looking at the evolution of them, stuff like that. You know, he was yeah, he really loved the desert. He loved the Gobi, and he spent a ton of time there. One of a cool quote from, actually, it's not a direct quote, but he references this guy named Fairfield Osborne in one of his earlier works. This is Chapman. And basically just makes a mention of how this Osborne guy in 1900 was working in the Gobi before Chapman Andrews, and that he posited that the earliest reptilian life in the world originated on the Central Asian Plateau and some of these areas in the Gobi. Cool. So that's kind of cool. If we're thinking later on in the theories category of some sort of ancient reptilian creature that has survived, that is an interesting connection there. But yeah, what else do you have on Roy Andrew Chapman? Or Roy Chapman Andrew. Man, so many first names. Pick a lane.
I thought it was interesting when he went to the capital, the Mongolian capital of Ulaanbaatar, if I'm saying that right. I guess it was then called Urga at the time. Okay. And they met the premier and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and other notable officials in the Mongolian cabinet. And so he wrote in his book, I can't remember the name of the book now, shoot. But basically... We'll
include it in the notes.
Yeah. He said that essentially the premier asked him to capture a specimen of the death worm, if possible, and that he himself had a personal connection. He hadn't seen it himself, but he knew a man who had lived to tell the tale.
This was the Mongolian premier.
Yes,
Very cool.
And then another cabinet minister, he piped up and said that the cousin of his late wife's sister, which is kind of a weird string, had also seen it. And I guess survived.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, so
this is in the public consciousness.
It was almost as if, like, that was a way for them to, not fraternize, but, you know, like, kind of, like, form some sort of connection with these people and to get their blessing, in a sense.
Yeah.
And they, even though they never ended up finding a death worm, I feel like... And it's Andrews, he definitely took stock in that.
Yeah, for sure. And for the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Premier to actually be interested and want to find it.
And it's legit. To them. Like, come on. Like, they're like government and they're asking these outsiders to, like, you know.
I wonder what their reasoning for it would be, though. Like, if they believe it to be real, obviously they have family members that have seen it or whatever. Do you want to know if it exists and catch it for notoriety? Or do you want to catch it to just be able to study it, to be able to, like, protect people from it? Because it's like, you'll know it's a danger, or is it to go into the...
I feel like it would have been more for the spectacle.
It must, I mean, it's 1919.
Yeah, that makes some more sense. But they never actually really expounded on that.
Yeah. You know, and I think, though, in the end, there was basically his work, Roy Chapman Andrews, would go on to inspire a lot of people to keep searching for this worm, because he didn't outright say this doesn't exist after a lot of his work, and he went on and he did find some what cryptozoologists would, I think, misinterpret as evidence in terms of just, like, you know, finding fossil remains of, like, snake stuff that wasn't exactly clear what species it was, or just random stuff like that. There wasn't a ton of info, but in the end, Andrews basically said he just didn't find enough evidence.
Yeah.
He just didn't find enough evidence. He wasn't completely discounting it, but he was a man of science. Couldn't find it.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. It's like, people will look at that and be like, this guy spent so much of his life in the Gobi Desert. He didn't see it. It can't be real. But what I'm saying is, like, I gave you this example the other day. Like, we live in British Columbia, and lots of our family is out in the Kootenays. So a place like Rossland, you're going to see lots of bears and cougars and stuff like that. Well, there's people that live out in Rossland that have never seen a cougar. Yeah. Which is, you're going to be surprised at that. They live there, right? You've lived there, or you've seen it once, which is, like, blows you away.
And, you know, it's even funny to think that maybe they could have seen it if they opened up their eyes and looked around, maybe. And, you know, I don't know.
Right.
The things that we kind of, close ourselves off to sometimes in our daily life. It's just... But
So,
obviously he had a lot of intention. He was definitely looking for this. It's not like he's like,
Yeah.
I'm just taking a walk here.
And Andrews was alive for a while. I think he lived into the 90s, and he passed away in the 90s.
Oh, I feel like I had a date for him that was like, basically he was born in the 1880s and died in the 1960s or something.
Oh, okay, maybe I was thinking of somebody else. But he did live quite a long life.
Or in the
and
80s,
he was around for a while, and he influenced a lot of people. The next reference, though, we're moving into, I mean...
So this isn't coming from a scientist. This is coming from a fiction writer.
You
Science fiction writer.
Go for it.
Ivan Yefremov.
Russian.
Yes. So he was a Russian
fiction writer.
Exactly.
Amateur archaeologist as well, from some sources that I could see, but he was a writer.
Amateur cryptozoologist,
right.
Kind of the gist I got. But he wrote a book in 1978. Or sorry, I got that wrong. 87. Dyslexia. And so this was a book called the Tassan.
These things are so hard to pronounce.
I'm gonna try. Anyways, he wrote a book.
Let me try. Tasadkak Govd.
That was weird.
Okay. Okay.
So, anyways, he did write a book about the land and legends found in the Gobi. And he does include a brief mention of the creature. So, I don't know, this is kind of decontextualized, but this is the quote. He says, "Another more dangerous animal also lives in the Gobi." So I'm not sure what animal he was referring to in the first bit of that.
Yeah.
It is the Kogorki. Oh my god, I didn't say that right. Anyways, quote, "It resembles an intestine filled with blood, and it travels underground. Its movement can be detected from above via the waves of sand it displaces." End quote. That was in 1967. Dune featured worms. I guess they were referencing his book.
Yeah, I guess so. Sorry, I was just
the source.
Yeah, Dune, or I guess Dune would have influenced that book because it came a little earlier. But Dune featured worms the same like. Dune. So I've never read it. Dune was like a video game too, wasn't it?
Oh, was it?
I can't I'm not a video game guy, so I'm not. But I'm pretty sure it was a video game. It may have even been a movie, but it started as a book, 1967, and it featured death worms too. And then obviously we see it I think Tremors was in the 80s or was it early 90s?
1987, right? Okay. For some reason, I thought it was 1887. Oh my gosh, I was just.
Did you say 1887?
No, I said 1987.
Yeah. You're good. You're good.
It's just in my head. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean the point is that at a certain point this became a big part of the public consciousness. Obviously, that this is a Russian writer, so he was privy to certain information, and it's still to this day a lot of extra work done on not just the death worm but other stuff in the Gobi. It's not in English. Mm. It's not even in other European languages that would be more easily translated to English. It's in Russian.
Yeah.
And obviously that's easier to do these days, but it's just not available. And I think we came across, even guys like Astonishing Legends have made that clear, right? When you're trying to find information in Russian, or when they were doing Hoska Castle and they're looking at stuff in Czech and then copy pasting it into Google Translate, it's like it doesn't work. It's rough. Tedious and rough. So anybody out there that speaks Russian or any other language, reach out to us. And we do have a Czech friend that speaks Czech. Does he speak Russian too?
I don't know, actually.
Yeah? Can't remember.
We should reach out to him and ask.
Anyways. So yeah, that was the reference from him. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting into the real nitty gritty. So
we're getting to the 90s?
Yeah, we're getting into get up with the 90s, guys.
That is a quote from Play the Concords. Yeah. One of our favorite shows.
This guy, Ivan Mackerly.
Cool.
Now,
he's still alive, right?
Yep. He's still kicking. Mm-hmm. He was kind of known for being one of the leading researchers for Loch Ness, the Loch Ness Monster.
Really?
Yeah, apparently he's a cryptozoologist. And
cool.
Yeah, so he's got some stuff published out there on looking for Nessie. Mm-hmm. And just seems like a super interesting guy. I
wonder if he's looked into Ogopogo then.
I wonder. I didn't see anything on his website. We have his site in the links, and specifically directly to the page about the death worm and his time in the Gobi.
Does he write in Russian though, or does he write?
He's Czech, I believe.
Oh, actually, yeah.
Yeah, he's a Czech cryptozoologist.
Right.
Yeah. But he's basically been credited as being the foremost investigator of the death worm, because he's the most modern, and he spent a lot of time there.
He's done the most translations too of Mongolian into Russian, and then the quote we have here from him is in English, so I don't know if he did that or if someone else translated it for him.
No, his entire website is in English, so I'm assuming he just has companion site, or he's obviously fluent in English as well.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you want to read that quote?
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Okay. So this is in his book Mongolske Zahade. All right. So the creature is, quote, a sausage-like worm over 0.5 meter. So in this account we're getting 0.5 meter. 0.5 meter long and as thick as a man's arm, resembling the intestine of cattle. Its skin serves as an exoskeleton, molting whenever hurt. Its tail is short, as if it were cut off, but not tapered. It is difficult to tell its head from its tail, because it has no visible eyes, nostrils, or mouth. End quote. So this guy, Mackerel, he never witnessed it himself, but he eventually determined that it could be real.
Interesting.
Could. Yeah.
So, he was a believer.
So he did say that they had a plan.
They had a plan.
They were going to go to the south. They were going to collect reports. And they were going to search for this worm. And yeah, he basically describes the early stages as being a game of hide and seek.
Right.
And the young people didn't know much. And then the old people refused to talk about it. So we already kind of mentioned that. But again, yeah, this is his own words. So, again, here, and then this is the whole roundabout thing. It's like, people in Dalanzagad said it could be found in Kanbogd, but when we arrived in Kanbogd, they sent us back to Dalanzagad.
Just kind of a roundabout.
Just in circles.
And that just goes to show, it's like people do not know exactly where things are. It's always just super obscure. It's like, oh yeah, go over there. And it was the same thing in the Zerzura episode, right? It's like people see certain things, like, go over that way, and then you go that way, and it's like, no, yeah, you go over that way, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, bizarre.
So yeah, they did hire some guides, some Mongolian guides, and they were fed the same information, the idea that it's dark red like blood or salami. It's difficult to tell the head from the tail, the nostrils and mouth, because it's not very visible or distinguishable, I guess, and that it moves in odd ways. Either it rolls around or squirms sideways, sweeping its way about. Sweeping. That's weird. That almost makes me think that, and this again ties into my theory, Amber's favorite theory.
You gotta save that, though. You gotta save it.
I am gonna save it, but that movement makes me think that it's using its tail to move.
Yeah. Like it's got some strength in that tail, and it's...
I wonder. I don't know. So anyways, after that guy, kind of, his expeditions tapered off, there was another zoological journalist.
Yeah.
That was 2005, I guess. It was a Richard Freeman from the Center for Fortean Zoology.
Right.
There you go.
This guy.
Yeah, and he mounted an expedition. He was going to hunt for the death worm, and of course he came up empty-handed.
Yeah, I couldn't find, like, a ton of detail on this Freeman. Like, specifically for the death worms. Like, there's stuff out there on him, but... Yeah, I mean, he kind of... Quick trip. Yeah, no, he...
His conclusion with that was basically apocryphal, so it's more of... It's less real.
Yeah.
it's more just the tall tales.
He thought it would just...
That's where it resides. Yeah. It's in the legends.
That it was a misinterpretation of an existing species, maybe like a legless lizard species, or some type of worm.
Or that Greek mythological...
Well, we're going to get into that in just a sec here.
Oh, jumping the gun.
But I mean, we're really... Yeah, so that's 2005. Like, there was kind of...
pretty modern, hey?
There was kind of a gap here, right? Like, from what we could find... There was sort of like the one reference the one thing in the 1950s was there was a big spike in reported sightings, but of course this information didn't become available to people studying in the West until years later. But in Mongolia in the 1950s there was a big spike in sightings of
1950s.
1950s. So that's just something to kind of fill in between here, because basically we go from 1919 up into. Supposedly there was a fiction book written in 1944 that mentions them as well. But That was another Russian book.
I thought that was part of Ivan, oh my gosh, what's his last name?
Was that the same one?
The sci-fi writer, the Czech guy, because like that was the inspiration for
Gotcha.
the second.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that was the story, the 1944 short story about the geologists in the desert that essentially get devoured by this thing, which is
just
pretty cool.
Just gets mowed, yeah.
Love that.
And you know what? Okay, we're coming into the 2006 here, and I feel like that story influenced a lot of these supposed videos or searches or whatever. They're basically all docudramas. So like 2006, 2007.
Define what a docudrama is really briefly here.
Well, okay.
I'll give you a rendition of.
I almost feel like
the film student.
I don't know exactly what the exact word for word definition is, but it's basically a dramatic reinterpretation, documentary style.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's almost like the more dramatic version of a mockumentary.
Kind of reminds me of Cloverfield, except obviously, you know, like that type of, where it's like the shaky handheld.
Yeah.
It's supposed to look natural.
It's like FUBAR, except serious.
There you go.
That's a Canadian reference, isn't it? That's a Canadian movie, wasn't it?
Of course. It's a great Canadian movie.
Great. We should probably hashtag FUBAR when we post this show.
Yeah. That burp was for you, FUBAR.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, pass me another Pilsner there. Okay.
So their docudrama.
So Destination Truth is what this one was called, 2006, 2007. And oh my God, everybody, it was so
horrible.
bad.
Horrible.
So bad.
I couldn't
have
watch
to watch
the whole thing.
I almost don't even want to post it to our channel just because it's so bad. Like maybe we'll just share a link somewhere because you guys can go watch it. But I mean, if you listen to our show, if you're a fan of our show, then you'll definitely like watch this and you'll be 5 seconds in and
you're just going to be shaking
laughing.
your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. First 10 seconds into it, you're gonna be like,
it is so cheesy. It's like, it's so cheesy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super fake. But some people must believe that it's real. They must.
Oh, you
why
mean
would they
the
not
video,
do it? Yeah,
not the myth
the video.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of sad, but it's
Well,
what it is.
a lot of people lack a critical lens.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, and then in 2009, New Zealand television entertainment reporter David Ferrier, this guy's done... it's just extreme stuff. Like he's shock value.
Sensationalist.
Sensationalist. Yeah, he's not an investigative journalist or anything like that working for Al Jazeera or something, you know what I mean? Like he's just yeah. So but anyway, he supposedly had an expedition in 2009 and reported that he came up with stuff, but basically he did not.
What?
He did not come up with anything. Like he came back the first time and was like, yeah, I saw it, or there was like this, and then later it's like, yeah, no, I can't. I came back empty-handed. None of the video, none of the photos or anything.
It's like I saw it. Wait, it was just a log.
Yeah, just a stick. So once again, the elusive death worm can't be found by a bunch of Westerners going into the desert for 15 minutes with a camera, kicking around some sand, and they plan on seeing it. Is how I feel when I read stuff like that. Yeah. It's like, obviously you're not going to find it. No. Remember when we were watching the Monster Quest for the Jersey Devil? And they go, they're like, we're going to look for the Jersey Devil. So what do? They get like 100 guys to basically link arms and with flashlights and guns.
In broad daylight
with reflector vests on.
Yeah, and then they had people in the trees
walking through the woods.
Yeah.
And then they come back at the end.
And they were calling out to, like, the people that were... Because they were basically trying to flush it out, was the idea, right? And then the people that were, like, positioned in the trees were supposed to, like, capture footage
the image or whatever.
Whatever, yeah. And then they were literally... So these people are in the trees, and then the people on the ground are slowly coming closer and closer. Yeah. And the whole time, they're, like, yelling to each other. It's like, so it's like, how much area are you
And then they get
covering?
back to the end, and they're like, we didn't see it. And I'm like, yeah. You think?
Yeah.
Like,
is that a surprise?
Yeah, like
how is that? That was actually
there could have been a
aired.
full-grown male elephant in the woods, and you wouldn't have seen it because it would have heard you coming from a mile away and ran away.
Right.
It's pretty hilarious.
Exactly. Yeah. So that kind of takes us up to the end of the most recent expeditions to find this thing, hey?
Yeah, there hasn't been any since then that we could see. The interest in it died off. That's why we're here. We're spiking it back up.
There you go.
Send people to the Gobi.
Yeah.
Look for this thing. So what the heck do you think this thing is? We're getting into theories.
We're going to get into theories. But first, we're going to take a quick break for a promo from some fellow Canadians doing a podcast. We've recently been in contact with them, discovered their show. It's amazing. Basically, yeah, the show name is Double Density. Your hosts, Brian and Angelo, are amazing.
Yeah, they're great.
super well-spoken, they're well-researched, and they cover a wide breadth of topics ranging from tech to the paranormal. So these guys are super legit, and yeah, again,
and they're Canadian.
They're
obviously.
a Canadian brethren, so let's take a sneak peek into Double Density.
From Apple products to Zelda games, and from aliens to zombies.
We are Double Density. Tech tales and paranormal primers with your hosts, Brian and Angelo.
New episodes every Wednesday. DoubleDensity.net.
Double Density.
All right, and we're back, and we're here with theories.
Yeah, so trying to figure out the most likely explanation of what the heck this thing is. I mean, it's got the craziest description of any of the cryptids we've looked into so far, which haven't been many, obviously to Ogopogo for an episode, but we've read a lot about a bunch of others. Mm-hmm. And we're starting off with the first one here is, could this thing, I mean, it's called the Mongolian Death Worm. Could it indeed be a worm?
A giant worm.
A giant worm. Now, the reason that this is the first theory is obviously just because this is what matches up with the descriptions. Mm-hmm. So I'll read a story here.
Cool.
So this is one of the early legends, and it's one that Ivan Mackerly came across as well when interviewing people in his journeys in the South Gobi. So he said, quote, "One story is famous among the Nomads that once a young boy," and this was in the town of, that we've said a couple of times that I'm struggling to pronounce.
Yeah.
He was actually followed home by one of these worms. He was stalked.
What?
And this was the description from, I guess, somebody in the village, but the quote basically goes, "One story is famous among the Nomads that once a young boy was followed home by the worm, and near his home later his dead body was found. It was believed that he died just from coming into contact with the worm, as no venom was found on site. That the worm had somehow made its way to the village. Looking at the trail and the sand, his family went into the desert to take revenge and seek the animal, but they did not return."
What? His whole family disappeared?
Apparently did not return. Oof. So that's one of the more well-known legends, and this is sort of a reoccurring thing, that it's often people who are either alone or it's younger people. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's always people who are super remote, but...
And a boy that's a little more vulnerable.
Right.
That's interesting.
So, and that's like, the description is of a worm. And so, like we said earlier too, in the National Geographic reference and a few others, that it's like a giant earthworm.
It's smooth. It doesn't have scales.
No, exactly.
So it's not, in that sense, it's not reptilian.
Right.
Interesting. And of course, reptilian would imply that it needs water of some sort.
Yeah.
Or that it's cold-blooded.
Right.
I guess, yeah, reptiles are just, they need a heat source external to their body to survive.
Yeah.
Or some sort of way to regulate.
The idea that it could be a giant worm, like, doesn't carry a ton of weight with most people, but
were we able to find any, like, examples of actual real-life worms that are known to be in existence?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So,
are these carnivorous worms, or what?
Yeah, you could say that. The one that kind of, like, stood out to me the most is basically this giant beach worm, giant sandworm, Australopithecus terras is the name of it. And it basically exists in eastern Australia. It's also known as the king worm. And it's called that for a reason, because it can grow bigger than 1 meter in length.
So size-wise, that's definitely...
So, yeah, length-wise, it adds up. Width-wise, it is not the width of a man's arm or similar descriptions.
They're like long, skinny things?
It's much skinnier, and we'll include a image on in the sources, too. These things are disgusting, but apparently they're used for bait. Like, they're not like a dangerous worm.
Like commercial fishing bait?
I don't know about like, commercial, but definitely just in general. Or I guess you could take one
and just like hack it up into a whole bunch of worms and use them for...
Depending on what size of fish you're trying to get, I guess.
Ooh, yeah.
If you're going for something big, you might just use half of it or whatever. No, but that's what they're used for. They only surface to feed. There's a similar connection. They spend the rest of their time beneath the sand. They eat mostly meat. They don't attack, but they eat meat, and they basically it's like dead fish, things on the beach.
They're decomposers.
They're decomposers, but I mean, if there's a mango decomposing and a fish, they're going for the fish.
Yeah.
You know, but there's some similarities there. So could this be some sort of a relative? I mean, this is not the same location, but if we're talking if we're talking Pangea here.
Yeah, and the Gobi Desert is so ancient, right? Like,
Yeah.
we got the Paleo lakes, evidence of dinosaurs, all this stuff.
Yeah. And obviously we see in a place like Australia how isolated all those species are, but there's still connections off of the continent there, off of the... Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of a cool, I guess, similarity. I don't think this thing is a worm, though. Like, that was the only kind of, like, really good example that I could find.
Well, since it's called a death worm, you kind of have to go there first, I feel like.
You kind of have to.
Explore those avenues.
I mean, and this thing, it looks similar to almost like the hagfish, which you're going to get into in a bit, I guess. You've got some details on that. But
just stealing my thunder.
Oh, I'm not stealing your thunder.
We did.
Okay. Type of snake.
So that's another theory.
We're moving on to that. So
the idea, like we kind of mentioned this, like a spitting cobra.
Yeah.
That does come to mind, definitely.
Yeah, because this thing spits venom. I mean, that's the easiest thing that comes to mind. But the spitting cobra doesn't live nearby.
A spitting cobra, like, they do live in desert environments, right? Like the North African Sahara.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the spitting cobra, and then there's like the Egyptian cobra, which I guess is a relative, and that's North African Sahara.
So different species.
Different species.
Both cobras.
Both cobras, both deadly. Different climate, though, most of the time.
I'm not buying that it's a snake.
The only similarities between the environment of those two snakes and the death worm is the sand, the actual like physical sand. Okay. In terms of like temperature,
and the rapidity, the rapid movement,
right,
could perhaps be. But a snake, again, like, what was the description that I read? It was like this thing like basically flops around on the ground, whatever, and like thrashes. It doesn't like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It doesn't move.
It doesn't seem to have the same muscular sort of
features as a snake. Yeah.
The description of an exoskeleton kind of definitely brings to mind different...
There's an interesting image of a supposed skeleton of a Mongolian death worm. I'll share that image to the links. But
does it look like a rib cage kind of?
Yeah, it looks like
I think I came across that too.
And it looks freaky.
Yeah.
But it's obviously not real.
Yeah.
But it would make you think that it's something like a snake. So there's another one, the Tartar sand boa. So this is one of the larger members of the genus Uryx, I guess, in snakes.
Uryx. That reminds me of like onyx.
Yeah. Hey, onyx. That's a Pokemon that kind of looks like a death worm. But made of rocks.
It doesn't spit anything.
No. And made of rocks.
Made of rocks. Well, that's one that we want to cover. We want to cover stone beasts and stone creatures, things like that.
Definitely.
Coming at you. An episode near you. Episode soon.
Near in time.
Near.
So yeah, the Tartar sand boa, some think that would maybe be some sort of a possibility, that it'd be like a relative of that, because they don't exist in the Gobi as well, but the females can grow up to 4 feet, so lengthwise, it kind of matches up again.
Boa? I thought boa... Well, I'm thinking Amazonian boas probably, where they're much bigger.
It's called the Tartar sand boa. I guess it's just a relative of the boa femme.
Does it make tartar sauce?
That's where it comes from. Didn't you know? Don't you know?
Right. Yeah, there you go. That makes sense.
But actually, sorry, these guys are in Central Asia, not specifically necessarily in the regions where death worms have been sighted, but there's not a ton of information on them, and so that's sort of a similarity to the death worm. I mean, just the area of the world that they're in is not a lot of...
But just the fact that they're known and they're not already associated with these descriptions and the mythology and all that makes me think that we're dealing with something a little bit different.
Yeah, I think so too. Mm-hmm. And we kind of stopped there with bringing out snake examples just because we could go on all day with snake examples, but it's like it always comes down to whether or not it's like, okay, like how close are these species of snake to the desert? They don't bury themselves in sand, and people that are nomads that experience this wilderness all the time are going to know the difference between a snake and a giant worm that sprays venom. Mm-hmm. So I'm counting that out.
Yeah. It's out of there.
Where are we moving here? Where are we moving on to?
We've got a few different...
What's the next most likely in your mind?
Well...
Type of lizard? As long as we're on the reptile train here?
Yeah, but again, not very compelling to me.
No, you don't think so?
Well, apparently there is a type of legless lizard.
Yeah.
It's referred to as worm lizards. Amphisbaenia?
Amphisbaenia.
And so basically they do resemble earthworms, both in their behavior and their morphology.
Okay, so how they develop.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there definitely is a wide distribution too. So they're found in the Old and New World. Although, like, so far they haven't really been found in Mongolia or in the Far East. So I honestly am not really buying it. But I guess Iraq is the nearest location to the area we're talking about in Mongolia.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is some parallels. The worm-like description is said about both of them, and the tail being similar to the head, so difficult to decide which end is which.
Right,
type of
that's
thing.
a similarity.
Yeah. And
You do not sound very compelled.
I have a hard time with this. Again,
I think this has much more weight than the.
Well,
snake
again,
stuff.
I don't have any information about the actual size of these, which
Well, I mean, I pulled up a few pictures. They're not that big.
yeah.
Like, they're not as big as what you would like. In order for it to be something that would be roughly the same size, it would have to be like a legless kimono dragon or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it would basically be, yeah, it would have to be much larger. But there are the similarities, obviously, in the description that it's similar, that it looks like an earthworm. That ties into it. And just the idea that there obviously are lizards that don't have legs.
Yeah, I've never heard of a lizard with no legs before.
Like, I have, but I'd never actually looked into it before. And
That's news to me.
if there's going to be something that's a real creature that we know of, perhaps the Mongolian Death Worm is some sort of a spin-off of a legless lizard. Like, it's an unknown species of something. Mm-hmm. The only things that don't match up with that are the fact that it can kill you on contact. These things are not hunters. They're not coming out of the sand to pull down a camel, these legless lizards. So in terms of it being connected to that, that's a big leap to go from a benign legless lizard to a relative that jumps out of the sand and sprays you with venom. That's much more like the spinning cobra. But there's not as much of a connection there.
No.
So,
well, what if two of these got together? One of the spinning cobras and one of the geckos or lizards or whatever.
The gecko.
Go.
You said gecko because the next one is gobiko.
Well, yeah.
A gecko.
That's an extinct guy, though.
So it's just an extinct genus of gecko-like lizards from the late Cretaceous period that existed in the Gobi Desert. Mm-hmm. Now, geckos are small. That's the thing about that. I mean, we included it because it's an ancient lizard. This ties back into the reference from Roy Chapman Andrews earlier on, where he talks about that guy. What was his name? He was there in the 1900s, and he suggested that some of that reptiles, they started on the Central Asian Plateau. Mm-hmm. So if there was going to be some sort of an ancient lizard or a spin-off of, one of these extinct Gobiko geckos or something like that, it would be in the Gobi.
Gobiko in the Gobi. I like that. Has a good ring to it.
Gobiko in the Gobi.
We're going to the Gobiko.
Let's open a bed and breakfast in Mongolia.
So speaking of things that are perhaps maybe not size-wise, the next sort of theory is the giant fluke theory.
Ooh.
And as soon as I saw this, I was thinking X-Files. They do that one episode in the first season.
That is my favorite episode of X-Files.
So good.
My absolute hands down favorite episode of X-Files.
But basically, this giant fluke theory, they say giant, they mean 4 to 10 centimeters. This is something that literally lives in the livers of other animals. So again, very, very far-fetched that this thing would actually...
Yeah, that's a similarity, like living in an intestine, born in an intestine or something like that, but otherwise not much.
And so basically, I have a few quick little whatevers. Like the head, so it has an oral and ventral sucker, so that's kind of how it feeds, and it does nest, obviously, it's a parasite, so it nests in other animals. They grow and live and die in other animals, and specifically in their livers. And that kind of, to me, brought similarities to to the worm, the giant death worm, just because they are said to feed on blood and other decaying or dying animals, that type of thing. So I just wanted to mention that as like, what if?
This is the thing about that. It makes me think about the same as like the worm theory. Like, is it actually like a worm by definition? Is that worms can't survive in that type of sand?
And then exactly that, like a parasite
either.
Can't survive without a host.
Right.
So
unless you're moving from camel to camel real fast and you're some sort of an adapted parasite that can exist without a host for an extended period of time, that's X-Files territory for sure, right there. I mean, that's a stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we've actually made that comment about the worms too. Like, like physically, like an earthworm, you are not going to find them in the sand. Like you might find them in sand, but that's not going to be their natural habitat. You go to the desert, you're not going to find earthworms.
They're just going to fry up.
Yeah, so
fizzle out.
Physiology-wise, it doesn't jive. The lizard aspect is much more likely in terms of like adaptability and being able to live in the sand. And there's obviously a lot of lizards that live in the Gobi, live in the Sahara, live in places like that.
So I guess that kind of wraps the fluke idea.
Yeah.
My favorite theory, I'm going to just touch on now. It's kind of saving my favorite for last, as usual.
Okay.
But my idea is that the death worm is actually an adaptation of the hagfish, which is a primordial bottom dweller known to prey on small worms and other invertebrates, and they are opportunists. So they eat dead or dying fish, etc. And my favorite part about them is that they're slimers. They love to slime everything. So that's their defense. And they essentially, once something drops to the bottom of the ocean, they snatch it up. And anything else that tries to feed on it, they slime them. And they just cover them in this shit.
Slime them.
Yeah, they cover them in this slime that is, it's basically suffocating. It's basically like a huge phlegm ball that just you get wrapped up in. And the way, because they actually get all wrapped up in this themselves, and the way that they release themselves from it is they tie themselves in a knot, and then it's almost like a slip knot where they slip themselves through a knot, and then it's almost like it just like sheds all the stuff as they're sliding through their own knot. So anyways, let's get into some
You're obsessed with this hagfish though.
A little bit.
We mentioned this in the Ogopogo though, didn't we?
Briefly.
Briefly.
And so it's a Pacific dweller. It's eastern side of the Pacific Ocean from Canada and Mexico. Inhabits fine silt and clay bottoms on continental shelves. So again, it likes that sandy sort of environment. So in my mind, if the Gobi Desert, obviously once upon a time, it was a primordial lake and there was a lot of other species. Imagine if some sort of offshoot of this hagfish developed into a sand dweller, we came from the sea and now we're on land, so why can't this guy do the same thing?
And presumably that would have happened relatively slowly, like because obviously species that existed that were aquatic like lasted through kind of harsh periods where other animals wouldn't have made it, right? So if this
thing is
slowly
super
receding, then it would exactly. That's it. People thought it was extinct.
Yeah,
it's right up there with the coelacanth.
Yes.
And things like that. That's a reason why that's a good example for sure.
Yes.
I mean, people thought it was gone, and it's not.
Yeah. And so just a few other stats on this is the idea. It has a very similar shape of body. It's a long eel-like body with no appendages, even though it's not actually related to eels, but it does look like that when you see them in their natural environment.
Definitely.
They have a maximum body length of about 25 inches. So that's about 63 centimeters. So how many feet is that? That's
don't make me do math.
Oh, I know.
No,
anyways.
but it's not as long as...
But again, it does have a similar color. It can range from dark brown to gray to red, with hints of like purpley red kind of a thing.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, the few pictures that I pulled up, it was looking really purple.
Yeah. And again, no
red.
fins. There is a dorsal, like a fin fold type thing. There's no exoskeleton. It has a skull and a jaw, but it doesn't have a spine, which is weird.
Interesting.
It's so old.
That's bizarre.
And it just uses its tail. It just flips it around, which is like...
Well, that maybe is a similar feature to the descriptions you mentioned earlier, with there being some sort of an almost like wings, quote unquote, but like some sort of just extra something going
extra
on.
Flaps. Mm-hmm.
Extra flaps.
You can never have too many flaps, right?
No, I guess not. Well, yeah.
So yeah, this is so funny. This is actually just a quote from Wikipedia, because I love Wikipedia. Anyways, great reference.
Yeah, we got a lot from Wikipedia for sure.
Yeah, so it basically says when they're disturbed, they ooze proteins from slime glands in the skin that respond to water by becoming a slimy outer coating, and then it expands into this huge mass of slime. And so,
oh my God.
So it protects it from predators, and then it clogs the gills and other things of predatory fish and guys that are trying to get in on its meal. And it'll enter it. Yeah, it will take dead fish and eat them, and it also take fish that aren't quite dead; they're still dying, and basically just weasel their way through their mouth or through their other end, and and just basically eat all the flesh from the inside out.
This is a real life monster.
Yes,
and I mean, it's just surviving. I don't mean monster in terms of like it's, but it is though. When you describe it like that, that's how it exists and survives. Yeah. That's a real life monster. You take the hagfish and how it lives, and then we know of a spitting cobra that spits venom. It's to blind. It doesn't kill on contact like the death worm. But you know, you got characteristics from one, characteristics from another of two things that we know exist, and put them together, and you got yourself a death worm there. Not that they would mate, but you know what I'm saying. I don't mean like. That's not what I mean. I don't mean that they're mating and making a death worm, but I'm just saying like features from only two things that we know are real, and you basically have the description of a death worm. Yeah.
So that's kind of my favorite theory. They both have so many remarkably similar appearance to the death worm, same shape, similar color. They're both invertebrates. They both have these disgusting mouths that are all spiky and filled with like rows and rows of teeth that they use to tear at their prey.
They have teeth?
Hagfish?
Those things, man.
Yes.
This is like...
Are you kidding me?
Honestly,
this is like
okay. I mean, do you have details on how deep these things are and stuff? Like, I'm afraid of oceans, like, already.
Yeah, so they're quite far down. They're between 16 to 966 meters below.
Oh, okay. So I'm usually swimming at like 868 meters, so I should be fine.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Yeah. But yeah, it is creepy as hell. And yeah, they're both ugly, terrifying, and they're both opportunists / like omnivores. They'll kind of, well, I wouldn't say that the death worm is an omnivore, but again, they're both eating flesh.
Well, they're
carnivorous. Actually, no, because we did get the account of the flower.
Yeah.
Right. So it is, omnivorous.
And we made that. Did we mention how that's possibly how it derives its venom, right? I think we mentioned that.
Yeah, we did briefly.
Yeah, and that's not that's unsubstantiated. Like basically, the actual flower itself is not.
It's not
super toxic.
It's not fatal.
No, like if you ate it, you'd get sick, but it's not fatal. So the idea would be it would have to combine with its internal biology to make it into some sort of a venom. So it had an enzyme or something. It combines with this plant. Yeah, we know that to be true of many different things, right? It combines with something else, and then you get, so. Yeah, interesting connection.
So that kind of wraps up my idea on the hagfish.
I love that theory.
Isn't that
just
cool?
Because it's like, I mean, we'd have to really
and it has a very, like, the skin, too. And I've even read accounts where the skin, because it's so smooth, doesn't have any scales, it's not like a fish. Right. Which kind of reminds me, of the death worm. Yeah. And apparently it's used in Eastern, like, this is Asian leather markets, and they sell it. They sell, like, bags, purses, like, belts, other accessories, and they call it eel skin.
And it's
a hagfish.
Yikes.
Imagine all the ladies out there that are wearing some hagfish and they think it's eel. Even though an eel really isn't that much better, but whatever. Gross.
Oh, dear.
Gross.
That's not, Well, I'm on to, I wouldn't say that this is my main theory, but I wanted to finish off with this just because it's really cool. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this could be a potential connection to an ancient legend. I couldn't find the crossover directly to Mongolian nomad mythology, and I'm going to be totally honest with you, there's a lot of literature on that, and we didn't go super deep specifically into that just because there was enough of the actual expeditions and things like that to look into for this topic. But I did come across this ancient mythological serpent known as the Aphisbaena. Aphisbaena? I think that's how it's pronounced. Basically, it's a Greek mythological creature.
Cool.
But
so we're jumping cultures here.
We're jumping cultures, but it extended through into, like North Hellenistic Greece, so like North Africa for sure. So this was said to have existed in the Saharan desert and beyond, whatever that means. But according to Greek mythology, it was spawned from the blood that dripped from one of Medusa's heads. and it
Why
resides in the
does it
Libyan
make
desert. So it basically that there's descriptions that soldiers had encountered this serpent along their march through the Sahara.
What?
So
What soldiers? Like Greek?
Greek soldiers.
Oh, okay.
And that this monster fed off the corpses left behind from battles as they were taking Egypt. So pretty cool.
That's pretty
Basically,
interesting.
it's described as a venomous, dual-headed snake-like creature.
Dual-headed?
However, later drawings in medieval Greece would depict it as having 2 or more feet, sometimes being scaled, sometimes having chicken feet, sometimes being feathered. So
dual-headed, like there's 2 distinct heads. It's not like there's an end with a head and then there's another end with another head, and it's like
right.
where we were trying to decide, is it the tail or is
exactly.
it the head? Okay.
So, but that to me was a connection, because it's like for some of those descriptions of the death worm, it's got spikes at both ends, which ends the tail, which ends the head. It might not be exactly the same, but the dual-headed nature of this serpent-like thing. Mm-hmm. You might not be seeing a head, but it's something on each end. You can't distinguish which is which.
Interesting.
I don't know. I feel like that's sort of a connection there, and just the fact that this thing lives in the desert.
Yeah. That's the most compelling part to me.
Could there be some, like, basically, this could be a similar legend to what may have trickled over and further north? Could this be a similar ancient creature that just got kind of like a mythological spin onto it? Because everything was a dragon back then. Everything was,
something. Yeah. I
it wasn't given like it wasn't given like it's a worm. It's a worm, right? It's a monster.
Yeah.
No. Even like a giant squid, it wouldn't be described as, we got attacked by a giant jellyfish or a giant squid-like creature. It's like, no, you got attacked by a monster of whatever proportions that you describe, however you're going to describe it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but
and of course, those people, like, they would want to almost like amp it up a few notches, though.
Obviously. Obviously, of course.
Just to make it a story worth telling.
Yeah. And then there was a guy, T.H. White. We're going to feature this book. I don't know if you mentioned it already.
No, I haven't.
Book of Beasts by T.H. White.
Cool.
We'll feature that, but he basically talks about the origins of this monster in the desert and how it could have derived its origin from sightings of none other than worm lizards. So there's a connection to the possibility of there being a relative of a worm lizard that is in fact a Mongolian death worm. That's my connection there to that. We're drawing black lines here, right, between all these things.
Mind exploded.
And
and we're not
we're just
not
having fun with it.
Finalize anything.
We're
that's
having
for sure.
fun
We're
with
just,
it.
Yeah.
It's all speculation. We just want to have fun with this, but
Yes.
these are connections, cultural connections anyway. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was a really fun legend and I'd never heard of it before.
That's cool. I love how we tied it into, again, like the Libyan desert, and
we managed to somehow still tie it into the Saharan desert. Ultimately, though, if I was to pick like a real, I would love for it to be an ancient creature hiding in the sand.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I do believe in the eyewitness accounts. And I think that the most likely explanation is that it is just some sort of unknown species of legless lizard. And that this species has adapted to possibly be venomous, or that's just a total exaggeration, and that maybe they spit like a cobra, but that's just to blind or distract prey. It's not to actually spit and kill directly from it. So that's my take.
Oh, is it? Well, my take would definitely be along the same lines. I do gravitate more towards my theory of the hagfish, or the like the variation of a hagfish that's evolved in such a remote area over thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And I always go back to the idea of the slime.
The slime.
The copious amounts of slime. but yeah, I honestly, I just had a lot of fun looking into this. This was one of our least serious topics, which is good. We want to mix it up. We don't want it to be a history lesson for you guys every time.
No,
right?
we want to. It's got to be just.
Got to spice it up a little bit.
We thought death worms would spice it up a little bit for sure.
So that's basically it. Eh?
Yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you so much for listening to what I cannot believe is already episode 5
Right?
of Into the Portal.
It's insane.
They say that 7 episodes is the threshold for podcasts,
So we're well on our way to not, and we have got a game plan. Like, you should see our whiteboards here. Like, they are covered in ideas. And again, if you have any ideas of your own, please send them to us, because we're open to anything. We want to cover stuff that you guys haven't heard about a lot in other forums and places. So again,
yeah, if you've got an idea, reach out to us. Our Gmail is intotheportalmailbox@gmail.com. So you can email us. We also have a new Facebook group, so you can join the group.
Yeah,
so it's
we can have discussions.
So it's at Into the Portal Podcast on Facebook. You can reach the link from intotheportal.com.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a place to put forth ideas or chat with other people or give us feedback or whatever.
It's not just a page that you can like now. It's actually something you can interact with and post stuff to and and just have fun with. And as well, we're really excited. We've been releasing YouTube versions of our previous episodes.
Yes.
We're up to part 1 of Homunculus. I'm going to get the rest of them up there by the end of this next week.
Yeah, so way more detail. We got maps and images and things that correlate to what we're talking about so that you have way more detail. So, you know, a lot of people reached out to us, said that they consume their entertainment over YouTube. And so, yeah, we're doing video content for you guys.
Yeah.
So check that out. And thank you so much again to everybody who's left a review. We've got some new ones in the States. And you know what? We were going to do shout outs, and I actually don't have it queued up right here. So we will definitely do some shout outs for the next one.
We're really excited too, because we've had some cities that have kind of, because we can see the analytics and we know where you guys are listening from, which is really cool. We have some fans in Roeselare, Belgium, which is so random to me.
Shout out to Belgium.
Yeah, so fun. As well, we've had one of our top cities has been Chicago thus far, but Chicago was recently bumped from their second.
Oh no!
Well, actually, no,
Chicago.
they were in second because Kelowna was first originally. Like our hometown homies, woo! A lot of support from you guys.
Definitely.
But again, we got Chicago, and they were bumped by Oakhampton in the UK.
Crazy.
So come on, Chicago. Tell your peeps to listen in, and you guys can get back up to that second spot there. And of course, Calgary has been huge for us too. So thank you, Calgary.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody who's listened. It's been such amazing just feedback and support.
It's really cool.
Yeah,
like there's people all over the world, like in Russia and
cool.
Czech, in Australia.
Yeah.
It's in
kind
New Zealand.
It's mind blowing, really.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
it's cool, but I really like it.
So yeah, and if you got anybody out there who likes the show
Again,
or loves the show and hasn't left a review yet, please leave us a review. That would be awesome. And
we always appreciate that.
Yeah.
And as well, make sure you check out Angelo and Brian's show.
Double Density.
Double Density. They're Canadian.
Yeah.
Just like us.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to episode 5 and Into the Portal.
Yes. Have an awesome week, and we will be back on next Sunday.
Next Sunday. We'll see you next time.